My name is Praveen Idra. I'm the chair of the Civil and Environmental Engineering here at Mizzou. So welcome to Mizzou. We're so pleased to have you join us this morning for this roundtable on distracted driving. When John Nelson reached out to us a couple of months ago to see if we could host this event, we were thrilled to do it because of how important distracted driving is for not just the community, but in the classes that we teach, when we talk to students about the adverse effects of distracted driving, the research that we conduct at Mizzou. We recently finished a Federal Highway Sharp 2 research grant in which we found that a driver driving through a work zone is 29 times more likely to be in a work zone crash if they were distracted. So it's near and dear to our heart at Mizzou and in the state of Missouri. We've also invested in a lot of resources on campus to do more research related to distracted driving. To give you one example, Dr. Sun, who is one of the panelists today, he oversees a suite of transportation simulators at Mizzou, ranging from wheelchair to bicycle, pedestrian, car, and all the way to semi-trucks. So we can study the effects of distracted driving, under the influence, and so forth. And we partner with other departments like the psychology, medical school, and so forth to study a whole range of the effects of distracted driving that can have on the driving population. Also want to take this opportunity to thank our longtime partner, Missouri Department of Transportation, for continuously looking for ways to make our roads safer. I want to give two examples of how their leadership and vision has enhanced safety in our state. First, they took a flyer on the diverging diamond interchange design before any other state did. That design has practically eliminated fatal crashes at interchanges. And now there are over 100 designs either built or in planning across the country. A second example is their thrust on innovative contracting practices such as safety design build that serves as a great example on how to optimize safety investments across the state. These advances, in my opinion, would not have been possible without the innovative thinking and leadership of many people at MoDOT, including Ed Hassinger. We have many serving on the panel today, Nicole Hurd, John Nelson, John Miller, and so many others at MoDOT. I also want to thank NTSB, the Missouri Coalition for Roadway Safety, and all the partners in education, enforcement, engineering, and EMS for exploring solutions to curb the distracted driving problem in our state. I want to end with a quote from a famous Missouri author, Laura Ingalls Wilder of the Little House series, that I think aptly captures our roundtable panel today. If enough people think of a thing and work hard enough at it, I guess it's pretty nearly bound to happen. Thank you very much, and I welcome you all again to Mizzou. Now I'll hand it over to Vice Chairman Bruce Landsberg, who is the moderator for today's events. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Idra. Well, as I said earlier, we have a long way to go, a short time to get there, so let's get started. NTSB is known for accident investigation, and of course, some of our law enforcement people do a lot of investigations themselves. So the first thing we do is we take a look at what happened. Then we want to get into why it happened, and then our job is to make recommendations, and we conduct safety studies and reviews of that nature. But that's only the beginning. The main point of today's meeting and where all of you folks come in is the job is to prevent the future occurrences, and that's advocacy, and that's what all of these people are here for, and hopefully you feel the same way. So obviously we have many people to thank for making this happen, because we certainly don't do it by ourselves. You all are the catalysts, and you can see that. I'd also like to thank our distinguished guests from the Missouri House of Representatives, because they're the ones who are going to be challenged perhaps with making this go forward. And finally, I want to recognize our victim and survivor advocates, because they've suffered great trauma as a result of distracted driving situations. So first off, what's the difference between an accident and a crash? I put that to the audience. Anybody? What's the difference between an accident and a crash?
The highway patrol says there are no accidents. That's why they call it crash report.
Well, you're very, you're very close. So an accident is an unpredictable, unusual situation. A crash is something that there's no surprises. We know what happened, we know why it happened, and oftentimes it's a result of an intentional act. So my background is in aviation. I spent most of my career flying airplanes and so on, and you can see the difference between the two. In the high, wide open spaces of the sky, there's not much to go wrong. We talk about nobody's ever collided with the sky. But we learned a long time ago that distraction can be deadly in aircraft, and we actually came up with a procedure for dealing with it. It was called sterile cockpit. And when you get close to an airport, shortly after takeoff or during takeoff and before landing, we don't do anything other than to focus specifically on the flight of the airplane. We're not talking about lunch. We don't talk about politics, what we're going to do after the flight, any of that. It's strictly on focus on the airplane. Who's got the tougher job, pilots or drivers? Now, this is a secret I'm going to let you in on. We as pilots don't like folks to know that our job isn't the most difficult in the world, but that's not true. As both a pilot and a driver, I can tell you what we do on the ground is far more challenging and takes a lot more attention. So, another question to the group. One of these crashes was caused by a driver under the influence, and the other one was caused by a distracted driver. What's the difference? I can't hear you. There is no difference. It is completely irrelevant. So the question is, should there be a law to possibly say, you know, this isn't the right thing to do? Where do we go from here? There are only 2 states in the country now that do not have an all-age ban against texting while driving. Missouri is one of them, and we would hope that they would come to the realization that this is probably a good thing to do. And I would also point out that for those of us in the federal government, I spent most of my life in industry, and getting used to government is taking some doing. But anyway, it's not our place to tell you what to do. You have to make that decision. So why do we get distracted? Because we're bored. You know, there's a long road up ahead. We don't have signs like this much, but I should probably talk to MoDOT about putting signs like this when we get to a boring stretch of highway. And there are a lot of different ways that we can be distracted, some of which you can see here. I would point out that spaghetti is probably not the best fast food to take on the road, but people will certainly know what you had for lunch. Driving with your best friend, while it may be, you may feel that that's reinforcement of your relationship, they're not going to help you much with driving. And of course, personal grooming, there's a time and a place. But this, we all know not to do. Many people have been asked, should people be allowed to speak on their cell phone? Do you think it's a good idea? And roughly 80% say, no, we shouldn't do it. And then the follow-on question is, do you use your cell phone while you're driving? And you get kind of a sheepish look, and they'll say, well, yeah, I do. Because these things are challenging and addictive. We looked at our first crash at NTSB in 2002, and in 2003 we came out with the report, and we referred to wireless communication devices, cell phones. Texting hadn't even been invented yet, and things have been kind of rolling on from there. So I have a question. Who's packing today? I'm not talking about the police and other items. I'm talking about these things. Who's got one? Maybe a shorter question would be, who doesn't have one? Does anybody not have a cell phone? Okay. Do you know how many cell phones there are in this country right now? Almost 500 million with a B. That's way more than we have people. So these things it's an epidemic, and we have to figure out what to do about it. Are there apps that can keep you from using your cell phone when you're driving? Absolutely. Are they voluntary? Unfortunately, at the moment, yes. The communications companies got us into this situation. They can get us out, but there has to be a desire to do so. So I'd like you to watch. This is an indication of what happens when a distracted driver makes a bad choice. And we have an inward and outward facing camera on board the rig there. We don't have sound on this, but what you would be hearing if you heard the sound would be a lot of screeching tires. Oh, we do have sound. And the driver that caused all of this, who, whoops, here's my exit, got away. That's not right. That's not right. And it could have been a lot worse. Fortunately, nobody got badly hurt in this situation. So let's talk about time. Do you have 3 seconds? Let's count it down. 3, 2, 1, impact. That's about how long it takes when you take your eyes off the road before your chances of having an accident go way up. Now, some of us are somewhat math challenged, so I'll put this in terms of football math. A vehicle that is traveling at 60 miles an hour covers 88 feet per second. So let's talk about, not that anybody has any interest in football around here, but in case you did, we'll take your fastest Mizzou running back. They're going to take the ball on the 20-yard line and go to the end zone, and that's about 264 feet. And in the time it took that yellow arrow, we are now into 3 seconds. And the longer you go beyond 3 seconds, the odds of having a crash go up exponentially. I'm not making this stuff up. This is hard science. Multitasking makes you stupid. That was a statement in the Wall Street Journal that was written in 1988. And we have distraction all around us. Here we have a couple of pedestrians. This gentleman on the left almost got hit by a car. He was crossing against the light, wasn't paying attention. The lady on the left, the lady on the right, in New York City, they have these sidewalk elevators so they can get goods down to the basement of the building. They have a 3-foot barrier that comes up. She was so engaged with her phone that she tripped over that barrier. It's 8 to 10 feet to the bottom. She had a really bad day while she was talking on her phone. So the next question is, who's bought a computer recently? Anybody? Yeah. Do they talk about multi-core processors, quad-core and 6 and 8 and so on? Right. And the reason for having multi-core processors is that you can do multiple calculations at the same time. It makes everything quicker. What about us? Are we multi-core processed? Nope. We are single core. Can we shift back and forth? Yeah, we do. We do it on simple tasks, and it works reasonably well, but we're not parallel processing. The problem that we have with distracted driving and so on is the cognitive distraction, not just the fact of holding the phone in your hand. Okay, another technical question. If you'd known you were going to get all these questions, you probably wouldn't have come. What's this? The bell curve, right. So which are you? Are you Luke Skywalker or are you Homer? Well, most of us like to think that we're on the upper half of the curve. Well, I'm going to tell you, as nice as Mizzou is, it is not Lake Wobegon. Not all the women are strong, not all the men are good looking, and not all the drivers or children are above average. That's a statistical reality. But yet our ability to self-assess is badly flawed. So we're going to step back 60 years to a commercial here. And, well, I think it'll be self-evident what's going on. And get the volume up.
contains Gardol. And here's how Gardol works. Now, just as I was protected by this invisible shield, Colgate's with Gardol forms an invisible protective shield around your teeth. Fights tooth
Do you
decay
think
and
that
bad breath
people
all day.
driving while
Yes,
they're
for most
distracted
people,
think
just
they
one
have the
brushing.
invisible shield around them? I'm too good for that. It's not going to happen to me. We know for a fact that if you thought you were going to be in a crash, you wouldn't be taking your phone out. In fact, you probably wouldn't even get in your car. The fact is, these things happen really fast. So how big a problem is this? In 2015, this is nationwide, we had almost 3,500 fatalities. That's undercounted. Almost 400,000 injuries. And the cost to the country, all in, was about $40 billion. These are undercounted, and we'll talk a little bit about the statistics as we get into this further. And that's how we get to the money. And as you can see here, that includes not just what the families and accident victims get, but the loss of wages and productivity. And this comes from our friends at the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. So let's talk about Missouri. These are the numbers from 2018, and Nicole is going to help me with that in just a little bit. But you had more than 70 fatal accidents here in the state of Missouri at roughly $9 million a crash. You had over 500 serious injuries ranging from internal organs to permanent paralysis. That's a lot. And then almost 5,000 minor injuries. The cost to the state, somewhere around $1.7 billion. Is this money well spent? I don't think so. So let's talk about freedom, because we as Americans, and especially here in Missouri, are very proud of our ability to do what we want to do. The right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Your right to drive and injure innocent people isn't correct. We have to have some way of managing this, and this is, of course, what we're going to be talking about. NTSB, we recommend banning all the personal electronic devices that do not contribute to the driving task. You can still use navigation, but we really don't think it's a good idea to be certainly talking on the phone and texting. But this is going to be an iterative process. So step one is going to be, here in Missouri, to outlaw texting once you have passed the age of 21 and go on from there. Just a thought. Let's put this into perspective. After a crash, the trip suddenly becomes irrelevant, and loss of life makes it extremely difficult for all concerned. As a pilot, I need a flight plan and a checklist. You'll see me referring to it here periodically because my memory isn't what it used to be and probably never was. So we've been through some of the introductions. We'll have a little bit here. We're going to talk about the state of distracted driving here in Missouri. We're then going to get into the education, legislation, and enforcement, which is how hopefully this gets put together. We're going to have corporate policy and regulation. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, it's all fine for us to be talking about this, but unless we convert it into action, we just spent a nice morning together and not much else. So, because this is being broadcast and webcast live, if you have questions, you can email us here at safetyadvocacy@ntsb.gov, and we'll be able to take those questions and put them to the panel. So these are the experts here. They know what's going on. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jennifer Smith with StopDistractions.org, who is nationally known, and she is one of the great catalysts here. So Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you very much, Vice Chairman Landsberg. And I want to thank the entire NTSB and the Missouri Coalition for Roadway Safety and all of the panelists for joining us here today for this really vitally important issue. StopDistractions.org is an organization that consists of victims' families all across this country. I am also the daughter of Linda Doyle, who grew up right here in Missouri. She was killed by a distracted driver in September of 2008. Distracted driving is an epidemic like we've never seen on our roads. The level of danger associated with this practice is clear, and we must do all we can to prevent any further carnage on our roads. We must socially stigmatize this behavior, and updating and modernizing the laws to keep up with that evolving technology is necessary to send a clear message that driving distracted in Missouri will come with serious consequences. Over the years, the issue of distracted driving has taken on new challenges due to that ever-changing technology. Drivers are not just texting or talking anymore. They're on social media, they're filming videos, taking pictures, they're streaming Netflix and YouTube. They're shopping, playing games, and with all these new uses, the tragedies are multiplying and becoming more and more horrific. The media continues to share these stories of these horrific crashes, and through those crashes, with each crash remains a family, a victim, left grieving and searching for answers. Most importantly, on that side of it, we ask ourselves, what can I do so this doesn't happen to anyone else or anyone else I love? We turn to educating others, to fighting for laws. Sometimes we are successful, and sometimes we are not, but we keep fighting. Today, we are here to bring awareness to the needless tragedies impacting drivers in this state on a daily basis by the distracted driving epidemic on the roads. I could list all types of numbers and data, but do we really need those numbers and data? I mean, we can just look around when we are on the road and you see almost everyone is doing it. We can also look right here to those who have experienced those tragedies. And so many of us, when I started doing this work, it would be every few months someone would come up and say, oh, I have a story too. Now you ask a crowd and half the crowd raises their hand and says, I know someone, I love someone who has been impacted by this. Everyone knows someone. It's time we stop this. Each year, countless families across the state of Missouri suffer the loss of loved ones needlessly due to this distracted driving behavior. Only a small handful of those families have joined us today, and I hope more and more families will come out and join us to help to honor our loved ones and to make changes for the future. These families, they put a human face on the tragic consequences of these crashes and the aftermath they leave behind, which have a ripple effect and impact the entire community. Behind each statistic, there's a story of a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, a child, a brother, a sister, a colleague, a friend, whose life was transformed in an instant by these crashes. By sharing our stories and with your help, we can bring the needed change. As families who have experienced these tragedies, we can no longer tolerate inaction. We must demand a cultural shift and an end to the epidemic of distracted driving. And each of you here and each of you watching online can help us and have to help us. The epidemic of distracted driving, we can change the culture behind it. It starts with a law. It starts with speaking up. It starts with making your voices heard. The people of Missouri's lives are worth more than a moment's distraction. Our loved ones' lives were worth more. We must change the perceptions the public and individuals have of their duties and responsibilities with regard to their community as a whole and the extent to which they are willing to give up certain elements of believed personal freedoms to protect themselves and others in society. We live in a fast-paced culture, I agree, but that has many of us addicted to this technology now, and turning a blind eye to the risks and tragedies is something we can no longer do. Today, we look at all of you, share your knowledge, your awareness, your education, your research on the issue, share the challenges and hurdles that you are coming up against and that we have to overcome in attempts to change policy through legislation, which can be a challenge like no other. But once we do achieve that law change, the enforcement of those laws is crucial. And finally, technology and engineering are a vital component where we could end the epidemic. But it's not all grim. It's not all doom and gloom. Today, I also want to shed light on some progress that we are making in other states, that we can do here as well. The future does look bright. I'll share with you some positive results we're seeing in other states across the nation and how we can do that same thing here by working together. We have the power to change minds and save lives, and I hope that we can empower you to go back and change your communities and help us change the entire state. With that, I would like to introduce the MoDOT Director, Patrick McKenna.
Thank you, and good morning. It's clear I don't know my way around the campus, even though I just live half an hour away. But I want to thank everybody for being here and for the comments that have been made prior. This is truly, I think, one of the most significant issues in transportation across our nation. And, you know, what I want to say is in Missouri, we have about 70 billion miles traveled on a yearly basis. So we operate in a sea of movement, and what we have on a behavioral basis while driving is essentially confirmation bias. Most people learn through behavior that's repeated. You go out and you use that cell phone while you're driving, and you're fortunate that nothing is in front of you, that you don't miss that exit, that you don't hit something that comes in front of you. So it confirms for you this notion that you're actually talented at distracted driving. What you are is lucky if you haven't had an incident, if you haven't caused injury to yourself or others. This is a behavioral issue, and the responsibility rests within every individual that uses this transportation network. We can't rely solely on engineering. We can't rely solely on policy. We can't rely solely on someone else to solve our own behavioral problem. It's a shared responsibility. And one of the things that in this next year, I've just been selected as the president of AASHTO, the National Transportation Association. And we discuss in great detail what we should focus on as an association. You know, one of the biggest pressing issues before us is reauthorizing the Surface Transportation Bill, national policy for transportation across the land. And a lot of people suggest that we need to focus on the funding of transportation, and that is certainly a critical issue as we make the engineering changes and improvements that are necessary for people to travel and get around the country safely. But I want to reach a little higher than that and suggest that there's a great purpose and urgency for action on reauthorization that extends beyond just the technical aspect of reauthorization itself. It is to focus on safety. The distracted driving is an element of that safety that we need to focus on, but traveling on this transportation network, every day in this country, 100 Americans lose their lives traveling on this transportation network. Here in Missouri, more than 2 a day traveling on this transportation network. The baseline of that activity, it's unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to everyone in this country that that's how we get to work, how we get to school, to our places of worship and otherwise. We can do better than this. It requires a national call to action, and that's exactly what we're going to do at AASHTO in this coming year. We're reaching out to partners across the country in these efforts, distracted driving being an incredible one. But the following goals are being laid out for this next year. We intend to put a national action plan together, working with our federal partners, working with associations and partners around the country, to renew a focus on what we consider to be a public health crisis in this country. Nearly 37,000 people lost their lives on this transportation network in the past year, and I'd suggest, without other than anecdotal evidence, that virtually all of it is caused by distraction. You're distracted if you're making the wrong choices using this transportation network, and whether it's caused by a cell phone, which has most certainly become an epidemic, or any other form of distraction itself, whether you're behaving improperly with speed or impairment or otherwise, it's a personal responsibility. So we want to renew a focus on traffic fatalities as a national public health crisis through the following avenues. Number one, in Missouri, it's been stated we've had challenges in raising the bar on the public policy related issues so that we can help with our enforcement of these issues. But we also know that we have personal responsibility. That's why we're going to have a national call to buckle your safety belts and put your cell phone down. Today's Buckle Up Phone Down Day here in Missouri. It's our third. And we're really proud that over 10,000 people have actually signed the pledge. Over 500 companies have done so. A partner state just announced, Kentucky, is taking that challenge as well. We're thrilled with that. They announced that in St. Louis recently, and we're going to bring that to other states, that personal responsibility part of this. We're going to continue AASHTO's role in the Towards Zero Deaths and the Vision Zero National Coalition with the goal of raising public awareness on this national health crisis. We're going to continue to advocate for advances in connected and autonomous and automated vehicle technology and the deployment of life-saving technologies and strategies, leveraging the 5.9 gigahertz band. That is a cellular spectrum, and frankly, it's under assault. It's been set aside for safety in transportation, and there are those that would take it for commercial purposes. We disagree with that. All 52 DOTs in this nation signed a letter recently to the FCC chairman to oppose opening up that spectrum. It's a critical avenue for safety devices and technology going forward, and we need to preserve that. And we want to facilitate a conversation with state DOTs and local communities to consider ways to deploy innovative infrastructure designs and technologies to more safely accommodate emerging mobility options, such as scooters and electric bicycles. We've had shocking and really troubling statistics on pedestrian fatalities. They're on the rise all over this nation. Part of that is distraction as well, and we need to address that. We've recently, I sit on the executive committee of the Transportation Research Board of the National Academy of Sciences, and the executive committee most recently authorized a consensus study, which is the highest study made possible by TRB, to study the public health implications in transportation. We hope these combined efforts, joined with our partners at NTSB and coalitions throughout, are going to raise and elevate the awareness of this issue. Distraction, but all safety issues related to transportation. We have to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries while people are simply moving around this country. I'll yield.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tate, would you like to say just a few words? I'm sorry?
Representative Kendrick.
My mistake. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
There'll be
that's
first
fine.
of many mistakes made today,
Right.
so.
I'll be brief and allow other panelists to speak as well. Kip Kendrick, I represent the 45th District here in Missouri, and we're actually in the 45th District now. It's parts of Columbia, central parts, eastern, northern parts of the city. I mean, this is an important issue that has not been properly addressed by the General Assembly. We saw some movement on it, I believe it was back in 2018, with the bill moving in the House, not much movement in the Senate. The House bill, the debate became on whether or not this would be a primary or secondary offense, and that became kind of a sticking point in the House. And the bill didn't really move beyond that, and there has been really no movement in the Senate. I'm optimistic by events like this and people being engaged, because outreach to legislators is critical on this issue. We hear from constituents on so many different issues or interest groups. This is one of the important topics that needs to be raised more in the Capitol and needs to be communicated with your elected officials locally, at the city, at the county level, but also at the state level. Reach out to them on a regular basis and stay engaged on this issue. That's how you see. That's how you raise awareness, the importance of it to you and to your community, and it's how you see movement in Jefferson City. I mean, hopefully we get there with the law, but as it's been mentioned before, law is not going to necessarily solve this problem. It's a step in the right direction, but there are many different stakeholders here at the table and around the state, around the nation, who are going to have to be engaged on enforcement of law, but also other ways, because we know that laws aren't always followed. This is going to take a community effort and a statewide effort as well, and hopefully we can do our part in the General Assembly to be part of that solution.
Thank you, Representative Kendrick.